The Cuphead Show honestly feels a lot like Spongebob, in a good way. In fact, much of the creative staff behind the series worked on Spongebob, and it's really easy to tell. The writing, the pacing, the dialogue, and hell, even some of the episode plots are straight out of Spongebob. And I'm saying all this as a positive thing about it. It's been forever since I've watched a show and thought, oh, this is a lot like classic Spongebob. It's really great. The Cuphead animated series has finally arrived on Netflix, but is it any good? Well, yes, I think it's great. I only watched about half the show so far, but I want to give some first impressions to spread the word, because I'm sure there's plenty of fans of the game that probably didn't even realize that it was getting a show at all. If you want me to make a full review after I watch the entire series, please leave a like on this video. Let's get this video to 35 likes. What I noticed first about this series is how they nailed that classic cartoon aesthetic without needing to go all in on the animation. The animation here is still great, but of course it's nothing like the original game, but it doesn't have to be, because if it was, this would have taken like 20 years to release and would have costed millions if not billions of dollars. That frame perfect style that the game has just isn't something that a big studio like Netflix would be willing to fund. But even without that, the coloring, the film grain, the backgrounds, the framing, and especially the sound effects, honestly, it all gives this pitch perfect vintage feel. There's even a drop shadow on most of the characters and props to simulate the look of animation cells over a background, and that is such an awesome detail, one that's sure to please many animation fans. I'd bet the creative staff had a ton of fun thinking up how to adapt this world into a cartoon, and I'm sure they had plenty of input from the original game staff as well. So Cuphead absolutely feels vintage in the way that it should, but there's a pretty big twist to it that makes it actually feel very fresh and modern as well. See, it mixes the vintage visual style with modern comedic animation writing. See, because if you think about it, the 30s and 40s cartoons that Cuphead is based on, they typically were silent and had no dialogue. And if they did have dialogue, it was very brief. Back in those times, we didn't think about cartoon characters the same way we do now. They kind of just had one defining personality aspect and like a catchphrase. You know, think of Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse. What's Mickey Mouse's personality? Like, he's nice, he gets a little mad sometimes, like he's not that deep of a character because they didn't feel the need to make him deep. So true old cartoons really focused on pushing plots forward just through silly visuals. But this Cuphead show is almost entirely script focused. I noticed pretty much every episode had like 6 writers on it. And there's always a really fun, slightly tropey sitcom style scenario for the Cup brothers to get their way through each episode. There's a lot of character interaction and like pretty defined personality on the two main characters. Cuphead and Mugman have a pretty great and also pretty realistic sibling dynamic going on. It's sort of weird because the first episode almost establishes it like it's going to be more of a Mario and Luigi type thing. Like Cuphead is very overconfident and everybody loves him, and Mugman is usually pretty sheepish and nervous about what's going on. But in all the later episodes, it's actually more focused on the two brothers interacting with each other and starting petty arguments over useless things like who ate all the ice cream and stuff. It's very charming and honestly not what I expected, but I mean, I don't really know what I expected, but this totally works. Also, I like that pretty much everybody in the show talks with those old-timey, I guess New York accents. Is that, I don't really know how to define it, but you know what I mean. Pretty much every single person in the show has a voice like that. It's pretty funny. But of course, even with all that dialogue, there's still plenty of jokes based on comedic timing and insane expressions. But, you know, done in ways that are much more modern. The expressions are really great when they're there, especially the episode that's about the baby. The way that the baby got mad, it just said like, mama, like in a serious voice. For some reason, I was totally expecting them to pull a joke like that at some point in the episode, and the way that they did it did not disappoint. It was really funny. I also like that episode just gives like no explanation on like where that baby came from, like whose baby that is. Like it's not even resolved. They just like send it off to another person. Like that's very much a way a classic cartoon would approach a plot like that. There's just like no logic to it at all. It's just a funny scenario and gives us a bit of character stuff, and then it's just done. There's not too much of a focus on like silly surreal movements in the true vintage cartoon way. You know, nobody's arms are transforming into trains and things like that. If you are looking for a series with a similar vintage feel, but that goes all in on the classic visual comedy, definitely check out the latest HBO Max Looney Tunes series. There's some really impressive and silly animation in those. The Cuphead show honestly feels a lot like Spongebob, in a good way. In fact, much of the creative staff behind the series worked on Spongebob, and it's really easy to tell, especially when, you know, you already knew that. The writing, the pacing, the dialogue, And hell, even some of the episode plots are straight out of Spongebob. And I'm saying all this as a positive thing about it. It's been forever since I've watched a show and thought, oh, this is a lot like classic SpongeBob. It's really great, because classic SpongeBob just feels like the perfect sort of formula for a silly dialogue-focused show about pretty optimistic characters. So if you're looking for a short series to scratch that classic SpongeBob itch, absolutely check this show out. If you're a fan of the Cuphead game, you'll easily love this show too. I think it's exactly what you'd want to see, aside from the animation style being a little different. It's not like Cuphead had much pre-established character anyways, outside of its visuals and, maybe like extra text stuff that I don't know about. So I think it's really fun to see the world come alive in this way. I know they cut out like the casino and gambling aspects of the original game's story. In fact, they came up with like a super ridiculous alternate reason for why the devil is chasing them, and I actually kind of love it because it's so cartoonish. So because of that, the removal of the casino stuff doesn't really matter to me. Gambling isn't something that people want to show off in a series that's meant for kids. And even without that little bit of plot, the series still manages to be amazingly entertaining for anyone of any age, and really true to the game style. I'm excited to see what they do with many of the series' enemies and bosses. So far from what I've watched, pretty much just the devil and one other boss has shown up. And honestly, I know it's blasphemous to say, but I'm not actually that big of a fan of the game necessarily just because I'm so bad at it. The style of gameplay it has doesn't really mesh with me, so it's really hard for me to play it. I honestly never even got past the first run and gun level, can you believe it? And I'm someone who loves hard games, but the sort of shoot 'em up style that Cuphead had, my brain just can't comprehend those sorts of controls. It seems like it's more frustrating than it is fun. But also, that's the point, and it just doesn't really work with me, but of course I sit back and watch other YouTubers play it and get mad, and that makes it fun. And also just being able to look at the amazing visuals is fun too. Oh, also, I love the theme song. It's rare for cartoons these days to have theme songs at all, so I'm glad this one slaps and fits the vibe well. Actually, there are a handful of musical numbers throughout the series, which is very fitting, and they're all pretty great. So this is a really great and fun series that creates its own unique vibe by merging classic cartoons with more modern humor. It's really enjoyable, and I hope you all go check it out. So have you checked out the Cuphead Show yet? Is it what you expected it to be? And what's your favorite boss from the game that you'd like to see appear in the series? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please hit the like button so more viewers like you can find this video. Please consider subscribing to my channel with notifications on to see my future content, and follow me on other sites like TikTok and Twitter for special exclusives. Thank you very much for watching. Please stay tuned for more.